Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy Chad Fellers, we have casual talk about the challenges and successes in medical affairs with the most exciting and impactful professionals in pharma. As always, we have another great one for you today, so stick around.
Welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles. I am your host, Chad Fellers, with my amazing sidekick, Mary Morton. How are you, Mary?
I'm good. I'm still nifty too, though.
I know, but I tried to come up with something more ingenious, and you know what? It's just I'm having one of those moments. I'm starting to get the A's like you are, and so as I get older, that wittiness kind of goes away. So anyway, hopefully
I don't have any gray hair, though.
Well, I mean, the young kids are kind of doing this nowadays, right? They're actually getting their hair frosted, things like that. Although I will admit, that my hair is certainly not frosted. It's been this way for the past 10 odd years or so. But how have you been? I have not seen you in quite a while or talked to you. You doing okay?
I am doing terrific, as always.
Good.
I've been busy with work, and the topic that we're going to be discussing today, had an amazing time at the MAPS conference last week that you weren't able to attend because you are like neck deep in launch activities.
Yes.
Exciting
Just
stuff over there.
got approval for an expanded indication, so really excited about that. But you're right, it's been extremely busy, and went straight into between the prepping for that and the approval and then all the things that go along with that, went straight into a Congress as well too, so the ACC. So it was a back-to-back, which is, there are seasons like this, but it's exciting, right? So ultimately for being able to provide patient care. That said, I really did miss out on the MAPS conference. Really wanted to be a part of it. So I can't wait to learn more about it, ask some questions, and figure out what I missed. I definitely have a little bit of FOMO. So with that, I know that you had a chance to connect with our guests while at the conference, and cannot wait.
Actually, the funny thing is, I didn't. We did not see each other live, even though we're in the same state, and it was an incredible conference. So that's actually one of the interesting things we'll talk about. We didn't get to see each other live, even though we've known each other for many years.
And this just proves that our conversation really is casual, and there is no reading a script or anything like that. It is
Exactly.
just pure talk, just to be able to share. Really is in much real time as possible, just to learn from one another. That's what we do at MSLE Chronicles. So with that, why don't you introduce our guest that you did not actually interact with at MAPS, but you're interacting with today, hopefully.
Yes, I do plan to do that. Yes. So today we have the amazing Denise Clark, a Texan. That's not in the bio that she gave me, but she's in Houston, Texas. She is a pharmacist by training, a seasoned medical affairs pro with over 20 years in pharma. She's worked in both small companies, large companies, small companies that got bought by large companies at present. So currently she is a senior MSL with Amgen, which acquired the artist formerly known as Horizon, working in nephrology and rare disease. Beyond her industry role, Denise is passionate about advancing field medical affairs, and she co-leads the newest regional chapter of the Medical Affairs Professional Society, and that is the South Central region, which includes our lovely state. And I'm just so excited that she's here. And Denise Clark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome,
Thank
Denise.
you very much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to kind of share more information about what happened at MAPS. And you kind of alluded to it. It was much bigger than it's been before. In fact, I learned that the MAPS organization has grown membership over 20% over the past 3 years. Each year, 20%, more than 20% each year. So we are now right at 15,000 members, actually globally.
Wow. So, Denise, how long have you been a part of MAPS?
I have been a member of MAPS since I think 2019. I just took it upon myself. I thought, oh, this is a great organization because it's not just focused on field medical. And if you want to learn something about medical affairs or advance your career, you have to know about all aspects of medical affairs. And so I decided to join on my own. And very soon after that, we got a new VP at Horizon who was one of the founding members. And she had Horizon join as a corporate sponsor. And so at that point, when you do that, I guess it's called corporate partnership.
Okay.
All the medical affairs employees get their membership covered. And so then I was able to become more involved. And last year I went to Puerto Rico meeting with the intent to, I know, Puerto Rico, it was great. But I went with the intent to really seek out the leadership and find out how I could become more active. I had learned a lot as a member peripherally. There's great, absolutely wonderful resources available, but I wanted to become more involved. And so this is where we are now. I talked to them last year about launching a chapter, and now we're doing that.
And I think Arkansas may be part of your chapter as well, too. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Good.
So
I mean,
South Central.
I was born in
states.
Texas. I was born in Texas, so either way, maybe I could make it work one way or another. I love hearing about this. Before we dig into the conference, I'm curious. Now, you made the statement about this corporate doing it as a team. I'm curious, what benefits did you see from that particular move for these organizations that are out there, these companies that may not have this for their teams? I would love to hear more about that.
Sure. Well, really, the membership, and don't quote me because I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it's less than $200, maybe.
Okay.
It's not that expensive, truthfully. We're well paid professionals. I think it's just a drop in the bucket. So on your own, you can do it. But when the pharmaceutical companies join and become partners, your membership is covered. And so then you can access all the resources. So they develop, they have competency developments, these working groups that are put together made of multiple professionals across the industry. And that's what's so amazing about it, is because you know what they say, if you've worked at one company, you've worked at one company. Everyone does it differently. Compliance standards are evaluated in different ways. And so you get to hear different perspectives. And then you also have access to webinars, and they cover all different topics. As I mentioned, it's not just field medical. So there's scientific communications, there is operations. They now are growing the membership in medtech. And so, you know, medtech's a little bit behind pharmaceutical companies in regards to the standards and what we do, but they're coming along, and they have medical affairs just like we do. So we can all learn from each other.
Wow, that sounds pretty familiar to what we're doing here, Mary, right? So maybe there's an opportunity down the road, right? When we think about leaders learning from leaders, I mean, why would you try to figure all this out on your own, or just be an N of one? This is my experience. I've been at this company for 20 years. This is how you do it, versus, and why don't we learn from one another to try to advance as, that's one of the things, Denise, is how do we become more of a strategic pillar within industry versus just this supplemental role or supportive role when needed, right? There has to be this evolution. And there's some companies that are really doing it well as far as advancing at a more rapid pace, if you will, or this less risk, or their risk tolerance rather is a little more than others. So I think it's just a great way to be able to leverage one another's experiences. So this is great, and that really is a testament to MAPS when you think about the increase over, you said what, 20% over the past few years. That's
Each
phenomenal.
Yeah,
Wow.
year over year.
Year over year, yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right.
And one of the things that really stuck out to me, like I think and leading up to the keynote on the first day after the workshop, those initial workshops, was when John was talking about this is how many people attended the first meeting, and this year, and then of course we skipped this year because of COVID, and there were almost 1,400 people at this meeting. And I'm telling you, the first one I went to, I think there was like around 400. And you'd see everybody there 5 times over the course of the 3 days. And there are people I never saw, like you.
Yep.
And like two people I scheduled to meet in the exhibit hall. And we never found each other.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. So it was definitely a lot of people, which I think has a lot to say for MAPS and the value they bring. And without further ado, let's kind of dig into it a little bit. I'm going to ask you very generally first. What did you think of this year's meeting?
It was exciting. I really liked it. There was so much. It was a little overwhelming how many sessions there were, and they were occurring at the same time. So I counted it up. The first session, I did not go to the pre-master classes. So I will say MAPS generally provides an opportunity the day or two before for these master classes or pre-workshops. And they had 3 that they were offering. One in field medical, which I actually did last year, and it was excellent. And so the first day when I looked at the schedule, there were literally 19 sessions at the same time. Talk about analysis paralysis and trying to decide where you're going to go. It was overwhelming. And so one great thing is many of those, they repeat at other times during the conference. So I was able to go to ones that I met in that first time point at a later time. But it was great. I can tell you the top 3 themes, and I didn't get deep into all of them because there were so many sessions, but the top 3 themes: medical affairs has to define their value, or someone is going to do it for us. So key about medical affairs impact measures and, the 4-letter word of metrics, that is key topic that was covered in multiple sessions and how we can measure our value. Second was AI. And I think we've heard this before. I don't think AI is going to replace us. We are highly trained, highly educated professionals. But if you don't jump on and use AI, you're going to be behind, and then you will lose your job. So it's definitely a tool. And it takes us back to that first thing, defining our value. And part of that is insights generation. I've heard it before. They say that's the currency of field medical. Up until recently, I would never raise my hand for that job because I never wanted to sift through Excel spreadsheets of free text and try and evaluate that. It took hours, if not days, to do that. But now with AI, machine learning, natural language processing, all of that can be done very quickly. And so we're able to pull out, sentiments and trends. And it's the age of big data. So why aren't we using the data we have? And then let me think, what's the third thing? Oh, compliance. Believe it or not, there were a few sessions on compliance, and I don't know about you, but usually I'm not raising my hand to go to a compliance session, but there were a few. And the trend there is what you mentioned earlier, trying to collaborate in a compliant way with our commercial counterparts. Medical affairs can no longer hide behind the compliance as a reason why we can't collaborate and work together. We have to be aligned because as an organization across, pharma industry, our goal is right patient, right drug at the right time. And if we all are focused on the patient, then everyone wins. So I think those were the top 3, but there was a lot.
Those are all my love language. Languages.
I was
Yeah.
seeing
I
him
wish they were
smile. I
talking
could
about
tell.
this. Yeah.
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 I think even one of the lines she said is one of the lines I hear you say all the time about the currency.
Yeah.
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 So it's interesting you brought up the compliance one, because for some reason I decided to go to the compliance session. And it wasn't that I'm like, well, I'm not really all that interested in this, but it's really like, this is something I know very little about. And so if I'm having these conversations with, the professionals in the space that I'm recruiting in, I think I kind of have to know what I'm talking about. So I went to one of the compliance sessions myself, and I can't remember what the title of it was, but there was a med tech attorney in my session, and it was clear how different med tech is from pharma. And so, talking about their, MedTech has medical affairs, and, they don't have a lot of the guardrails that pharma does, but they need to get on the bus before somebody pushes them onto the bus, right?
Yes.
But it was, it, and then all of the things that they're governed by, that was news to me. I wasn't even thinking about the anti-kickback statutes, because I would have thought that would have really been something that more fell under commercial. But the more the examples came out, I was like, oh, wow, that kind of stuff can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we talk about compliance and the differences between various companies, it really has to go to the tolerance for risk. And I'm not sure if you went to the same session. It was called Partnering with Compliance to Mitigate Risks in Medical Affairs / Commercial Interactions.
Yep.
Was it that one? Okay. And in general, all of us are governed by the same compliance rules and laws. So the anti-kickback, everything, excuse me, applies to us. In fact, my understanding is there really is no differentiation from medical affairs, an MSL, and a sales rep. We are all representatives of the company, and we have guardrails to differentiate our role. So, if you're called before a judge and you're being asked questions, you can clearly say, "This is what we do. This is our process, and this is our policy, and how we do our jobs." Versus, well, in this scenario, I do this, and on this scenario, I do that. It's very wishy-washy, and so we have to have standards when it comes to that. And so that's why there's a differentiation between MSLs and sales, our sales counterparts in the organization. But externally, we're all representatives of the company. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that, but I just couldn't see where a medical person, well, I'm always kind of thinking field medical, would ever find themselves in a situation to be vulnerable to violating the
Yeah.
anti-kickback statute, until some of the examples were given.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all
sorry, Chad.
No, you're fine. FDA. Yeah, I was actually doing a little digging the other day, just trying to see kind of where things are from. I mean, there's really not been any updates to the laws when it comes to guidance around even the distinguishing between medical and commercial. As a matter of fact, all of us are labeled or considered promotional, if you will. And I know that's one of those words that just makes causes panic among medical affairs community. But that is how the FDA views us as well too. So we have to, obviously, the things like fair and balance and really understanding what the lanes to really differentiate. But to your point, Denise, I mean, there are some companies where MSLs actually give promotional talks on behalf of the company versus contract. So we all have these different types of philosophies, as well as which they're not right or wrong. Quite honestly, I think it's right or left. And so
Right.
I love having the conversations about this, right? I mean, because we do need to, 20 years ago, medical was the compliance officers, if you will. I mean, that was part of their role, was to make sure, and that's just shifted in ways too. When you think about even how technical some of these products are now with gene therapies, et cetera. I mean, it requires a high level of understanding from a medical perspective. And so you have to be able to proactively speak about certain components of a product, whereas typically a sales rep might be the person that led the charge for that in a past life or not. I mean, we have to um, the way science is advancing, it really requires us to be able to step in to help fill that role where appropriate, and in an appropriate manner as well too. So I'm glad that there were some conversations around that. And I think that's been one of my how do you increase a company's comfort level with risk, right? Unless you can hear from others or see what others are doing in the market. I was trying to think about when the last time medical affairs was actually identified by the OIG for violating or misrepresenting products, et cetera. And it's been a long time since it's been,
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably 4 or 5. So again, I don't know if we should walk in fear with these types of things as we're thinking about new ways of doing things. I think it's more about how do we just thinking creatively, but in a balanced way. So anyway, I could spend the entire conversation talking about this particular subject, but I know there's several other things to chat about. And you mentioned 3 different things, right? Overarching, right? Everything around insights, compliance. What was the third one? I just drew a blank on that.
AI, right?
AI. Okay, so which one do you want to start with, Denise? I'm curious. Which one stood out
Well,
above the
right now,
rest for you?
I think the hottest topic is medical impact measures and developing our value, or actually promoting to others what our value is. And you kind of spoke about the fact that early on we have had a much more supportive role, right? And I like to say sometimes in my early days, we were kind of the forgotten stepchildren, in regards to where we stood in the success of the company. And when people were talking about budgets, we were the cost center. So now we really need to, and it's been $1 million question forever, is we can't tie sales numbers to medical impact. And traditionally, we've used or translated commercial metrics, activity numbers to our field medical team. And it doesn't connect to anything. So for sales, if you see an increase in reach and frequency, the next step is you see an increase in sales. MSLs, you see an increase in the number of interactions or engagements they have with HCPs and KOLs. What's the next thing? That number means nothing, really, truthfully. It means that potentially they had an engagement with the doctor, they shook a hand, there were that many butts and seats at a presentation, but what was the end all impact of that engagement and interaction with the healthcare community? And that's been the $1 million question. And so now, especially with AI and the new technology, we're able to dig in deeper and find out and determine what these impact measures can be. One of those that you can use even without AI, I think, is looking at the scientific journey. And that was one of the sessions. I'm looking at my paperwork. What was it? It was about insights generation, but the scientific narrative. So essentially, the goal of our conversations with healthcare providers obviously is to educate so that they understand the risks and benefits of the therapy, appropriate patient types, but also to see a change in sentiment or medical practice. If that agent has become the standard of care or has been added to guidelines, you want to see an increase in the identification of those patients in that disease state, and then also potentially increase in diagnosis and treatment. It doesn't necessarily mean to be specific to your company's product. A great example is in the gout space. There are old therapies, allopurinol and Uloric that are being used. Those are oral therapies, and those are the standard. But then there's a more rare case of uncontrolled gout that needs an infused product. Well, they have to be treated with the oral agents in order to get to that, but they have to be diagnosed and treated appropriately. So there's a lot of different measures that can be evaluated in the impact of field medical when talking about that topic. Another one would be in GI, and you can look at claims databases and determine a change in the treatment paradigms that are occurring. Always remembering you have to think of the baseline first. You have to have a baseline in order to measure a difference. But if I go back to that scientific narrative, the MSLs easily can measure on a scale of 0 to 5 per se. 0, they're meeting with a physician or a nurse practitioner for the first time, and they have no knowledge of the disease state or the drugs that are used to treat that. That would be a 0. And then all the way up to 5, they understand the disease, they're diagnosing patients, they're even speaking from the podium, educating others. And so that is a scale that the MSL, when they go in and they leave, they can add insights in regards to kind of quotes that came from that and why you as the MSL think that they're a 2 or a 3, and the insight has to be attached to that. So then you're seeing that change over time and the difference and impact in your interactions with them.
I like that. I think, or I guess one of the follow-up questions I have for that is, in this, was this from more of the view of how does the MSL move someone along the scientific, or is it around how does medical affairs? Because I think those are different things, and I think that there are consequences based off the decision or the approach that's taken. So what did you hear out of that, as far as, is it more of a function dependent, or is it over the overall organization within medical affairs?
That's a mixed answer. So I think field medical is the hardest to determine, and that was a real focus at the MAPS meeting. And the session I went to was really focused on field medical, but medical affairs in general also has a place for that. SciComs, how many publications? Again, it's all share a voice, right? We're all saying and educating on the same thing. We have to have our SciCom colleagues because they're developing and working on getting things published, which we then go out and talk about and educate our HCPs on if they haven't seen it already. So there's probably easier metrics to find, measures for our internal medical affairs counterparts, but the focus at MAPS, unless, Mary, you went to any other sessions that related to impact measures, I don't remember seeing any that weren't related specifically to field medical.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, one of them was I guess defining and strategizing what is impactful. But one of them that I went to that I really liked, that I think you said you went to, was the one that Marsha Walkup and Linda Traylor, Melissa Santiago led,
Yes.
which was how leadership can coach their field teams through insight gathering and identify. And that was a workshop-y kind, like not didactic, like you have to get involved and work together with people on your table. And I really liked that one
Yes.
because it's problem solving. And Chad, I know, okay, during the meeting in some sessions, I would like screenshot a workshop thing and send it to him, not to help me answer it, but to see how he would solve it. And I wanted to send you a couple of the ones we were working on in this session, which I still will. But it was really interesting because it helped people think more strategically about what's the follow-up question I ask. Why am I asking? That was one of the things I thought was really funny, is like, if you walk into a KOL meeting and you're asking a question that's like on your list, that somebody gave you a list to ask, and you're like, I have no idea why I'm asking this question, but I'm going to ask it and I'll get the answer, and I'll voice memo it to myself and record it in Viva later. if you don't understand why you're asking the question, you don't know how to ask follow-on questions or figure out what all that stuff means. But I really, really enjoyed that session. So did you went to that one as well?
Absolutely. And, talking about the questions, you can essentially lay out that scientific narrative and then what the potential questions would be that you would ask to get them to that place. And then at the same time within your organization, determine what resources the MSL has, whether that's publications that have been put in, that have been published by our SciComs colleagues, or, slide decks or animations, whatever it is, so that, obviously other scientific literature. And so then you have this toolbox for your MSLs to utilize depending on what they're hearing from their KOL. And that then moves it down that spectrum from, I don't think most people are starting at 0. We'll just put it there, but up to 5, and that you have a goal in place. And actually, I have to look at my notes because this was an excellent, and I think it came out of that session. Here's a quote. Vision without a plan is a dream. A plan without a vision is a nightmare.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. I really like that this conversation is continuing to advance. I mean, just listening to what you were sharing, Denise, and I think it's great that we're thinking about it even from just from the field perspective. But even hearing some of the things that you mentioned too about we have ways of understanding how SciComs. I would love for us to get to the place where we're starting to think about these things as an extension, like a field medical being the extension. While we can say, because like in that scenario you mentioned, SciComs, they're getting basically they're getting good marks if they publish 2 things, but that doesn't say the impact on clinical decision making based off those publications, right? And so if we're putting just the pressure on the field to move somebody along, and it's a subjective in ways too,
Absolutely.
there's a tendency for the MSL to want to, just like if it's the MSL is recording the length of a call and it's 15, 30, 45, right? I mean, if it was a 20-minute meeting, nobody's going to pick 15. They're going to pick 30, right? They're never going to sell themselves short. And so I think we have to really get to the point where we're evaluating how does the scientific content, and now with AI and some of these tools, being able to, there's multiple ways of being able to do that, but be able to say, okay, we asked this question aligned with this strategic imperative, that we got this answer, and this was the reason why the answer. We utilize this resource to do this, and so you can start putting all that information together, and then on the back end, a field director can look and see if there's any kind of discrepancies across regions, and maybe there's a coaching opportunity in one that's lower than the other. But if you take that out of the hands of the MSL, that it's not based on their performance, how they move somebody along the journey, but truly understand why or why not this is moving along. That's where I think the next level is where we need to get. So we're thinking about this and not just putting pressure on one team. There needs to be a shared responsibility with this as well too. So, but it's a great conversation. And to your point, we need to be able to move away from just pill counting, if you will, or those types of things. But even seeing, okay, so how much does this provider, they're 20% under the diagnosis rate compared to their region or to the US. How can we move it? Can our conversations move along to where there's a change in the increase in diagnosis? Those are the kind of things I start getting really excited about. Okay. All right, great. So, but I mean, again, I could talk about this a lot. So talk about another one of these. AI, do you want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about, let's go there. What did you learn from that?
Yeah, I want to hear this too, because one of my favorite vendors and I were talking one night after everything was over, and he was telling me about something they're working on. And he was like, it could eliminate the need for an MSL. I'm like, okay, that kind of put me out of a job too. So,
yeah.
But then I said, it will never happen. MSLs have been evolving for the past 25 years. I've been recruiting in them, and they're always ahead of whatever you guys are going to develop. It's just a tool. So anyway, I want to hear what you think.
Absolutely. Truthfully, this time I didn't focus as intently on the AI topics, although, like I said, it was everywhere. There was a session, it was actually one of the vendor sessions that I attended, and it always goes back to insights and measures. So you see that influence there. But this was by Definitive Healthcare and Monocle. And it was from data to strategy, uncovering KOL influence and behavior. And so there's two parts of that too. You got to start at the beginning. Are you targeting and talking to the right healthcare providers? And I'm very particular about using that terminology and not blanketly using KOL. And I see that used across the industry. I'm going to go talk to my KOLs. Are they really key opinion leaders? Because our job is also to develop key opinion leaders. So if you're launching in a new therapeutic area, I supported an anemia drug. There's no such thing as an anemiologist. There's not.
I think you just made one up. I think you just made up one. That's
I
great.
think she did
That's
too.
good. That's good. I like it.
So we have to identify who are those key targets and their sphere of influence also. And so there are platforms available that are using AI, but also traditional forms. I've always said MSLs are really good at stalking because we can do Google searches and find information through publication searches and such to find out where the movers and the shakers are, or who's a key opinion leader in that topic, because we want to connect with them. And it's a two-way street, right? It's a partnership. So it's not just gaining information from them, but it's also sharing information and resources with them. And so this session went into how they identify and can use KOL data, such as publications, meetings, clinical trials that they are involved in, because clinicaltrials.gov has it all. And then clinical data, we are now seeing the incorporation of claims databases, electronic medical records, and then digital. And that has not been as focused on digital opinion leaders. I don't think we've really found a niche for who's going to be responsible for those healthcare providers that are kind of building their influence that way. I will personally admit I'm a little addicted to TikTok, but you can learn a lot. And there are a lot of physicians, med students, residents that are out teaching on TikTok of all things. And we have to be open to learning more about that influence, because it's only going to grow as the healthcare providers retire and we get a younger generation up in that. So they use that and they can develop an influence mapping, this dynamic map of how KOLs or HCPs are connected, whether they went to school together, were in residency together, were co-investigators. So then across the country, you can identify, I'm going to call on this HCP, but so-and-so MSL in Maryland might be contacting the counterpart, and you may be able to connect and work that network. What else did they talk about?
I actually had a question when you were talking about the claims data part.
Yeah.
Because this is, and I probably should be asking this kind of stuff offline, because everybody probably knows this except me, because I'm just a recruiter. But okay, so
don't add the just. You're important. It's not just.
Thank you.
Hey, quit sucking up to her, Denise. I mean, that's too much
sucking
on
up
this.
to me.
Okay, go ahead.
You should suck up more.
Go ahead,
Chad.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So are the prescribers' names on a part of the publicly available claims data?
I think there are MPI numbers, but it depends on what's available. There's vendors that are available, and I know very little about this topic in regards to the data analysis.
Mary. Yeah, there are, Mary.
So then that brings up my point is like, just because they're a high prescriber doesn't mean that they're a KOL.
No, absolutely. You make a very, very good point. And it's not, and I'm not speaking specifically of prescribing the the product that we are supporting. Mine is more in the disease state. So for a disease state, a rare disease that, we see a low prevalence, let's say 4%, but then we know in a certain subset of patients in a specialty, it's likely higher. If you're not, you can look at diagnosis codes for that rare disease and see if it matches the prevalence that we know. And then over time, this is where you can get to that level of detail. um, you can look and see, compare a HCP that has had no interactions with industry representatives, and then you can go to the level of those that have had interactions with our commercial colleagues and/or the field medical personnel, and see if there's a change in that, or even just ordering certain tests. So if you have a cardiovascular drug or a cholesterol drug, are they ordering LDLs or now LP little a? And you can see if there's a trend of that going up and potentially tie that. It's loose,
It's an
obviously. It's
it's
trend.
indirect, but it's certainly
Right.
it's a step in the right
an indicator.
direction, right? I'm going to
Exactly.
say, okay, hey, this is, and so Mary, to answer your question on that, so it just depends. Some companies or some systems have EMR data as well too. So as far as like prescriptions that were done, but even like with the where I've seen it done from the medical perspective is it's not product specific. It's more around the therapeutic class, for example. So
The diagnosis code you
yeah,
were talking about.
well, I mean, or it could be,
ICD.
or a GPI code is what for drugs, right? So if it's at a broad enough level, you can see, okay, all the four different therapies that are available. It can back it up to where you're not seeing each one of the like the like the percentage of each different product being prescribed, but and ultimately you could say, okay, there were 100 prescriptions for this therapeutic area at this time, and now there are 200. Well, you could make the assertion of saying, okay, my MSL went into this institution, had conversations on disease awareness and this, that, and the other, or whatever that is, or under maybe it's or underserved populations, right, on only one therapy versus two, and now they're on two. So this, you could make that tie that's back to education, if that makes sense. So that's in essence what this is. It's not necessarily a product specific type of thing for an MSL. You're right, because we're not tied to sales, but we can be tied to, that's the thing where we can evolve this. I mean, we can be tied to an increase in the number of patients now that have been diagnosed, or those that are the time to diagnosis. I think about rare disease,
Exactly.
right? I mean, it's so hard. It may take 7 years for patients with narcolepsy to really be identified. All these, so can you look at claims data not only to understand progression of diseases, but then also, okay, where are some things that we could potentially close the gap, like Denise was talking about, like if we had this certain test done more, that will help increase that and close the gap. So that's how you can start telling the medical affairs value, is being able to communicate those types of things, and really starting going after that outcome data, if you will. So, I mean, it's an exciting time. I think we're also trying to figure out what that looks like.
Right.
It can't be the entire way of assessing performance, but it could be a component of it. I don't see why it couldn't
It
be
absolutely.
in ways,
Yeah,
right?
it absolutely has to be the component. And I want to state, you can't get away from the activity metrics either, because in order to make an impact, you have to have activity.
That's right.
You have to be having these interactions and engagements with healthcare providers. So that is a part of it. I don't think it should be the headline. The impact of what we're doing is the headline, and this is how we're doing it. Should be how it's presented. Yeah.
Yes.
Headline. I like that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
absolutely.
steal that. I'm gonna start using
Yeah,
that.
the amount of activity, though, I would say helps fuel confidence in whatever you found as well too. And there is value of
Absolutely.
being able to saying that, and then being able to utilize AI to say, okay, in this provider type, or in this is where they are, or this is what they're saying. And so it gives you, really, it's more of that meeting a provider wherever they are in the journey, regardless of provider type, et cetera. So uh, it's high time for companies to really kind of get on board when we're thinking about leveraging these types of tools. I'm fully convinced.
I think part of it has been budget. Um, Medical affairs, especially field medical, is a very large portion of budget for salaries. And so that's where that cost center comes from. And then to ask for investment in claims databases, because that it all costs money. But if we can show that value, then they see what the investment is paying for. The other thing that I wanted to say too about that, though, is many of those impact measures are longer term.
That's right.
And that's the catch 22, because a lot of times our leaders want to see measures annually or, biannually. And these may be 2 years out. You're not going to change the practice of medicine and make something a standard
Right.
overnight. It takes time, and it takes multiple repetitious opportunities for the organization to engage with them.
Yeah. You also mentioned about the digital experts or digital opinion leaders. I think one of the things I think that I learned in this a couple of roles ago was these are becoming more prominent. Why is that? Because, like, think about rare disease, right? You may have 3 KOLs across the US that are on every single they're the lead for every investigation. They're always being called to the podium. Then you have these up and comers wanting to be able to break in, but cannot break in. And so what's the easier path? Is it gaining a following and showing their thought process online versus trying to be a part of a publication? You have to think smart with your time as well too, and it's an easier path. I'm not saying it's not less valuable, but it's one of those things. That's how we gain entrance and become recognizable and establish a following, is through this. If I can provide my input and thoughts and really kind of lead in this way, I can capture a whole lot more people and be able to establish my name in this too. So I think even how we think about as medical affairs engaging within digital space, what are we comfortable with that? How are we thinking about from an omni-channel perspective? Are we doing podcasts now? Is that something where we can interview with KOLs that way? Is that a way of sharing it? Is it online from a virtual there's so many different ways beyond what we're doing now that can really help understand our value. It gives that 360 view as well. You tie it to insights as well too. It's not just what the field gets, it's what how the entire organization is functioning, medical affairs, whether it's MedInfo, whether it's the medical affairs website, et cetera, right? So I think how do we understand the shared voice? I think is what we're getting at as well too. How much is the information the MSL went in and talked with the KOL? Are they repeating that at an upcoming Congress? Are they incorporating it into that's another value measure as well. So it's a great discussion. One of the things I want to know though, Denise, is how, I didn't get to go. So is there a way that I can, I'm a MAPS member. How do I find out
Yes, absolutely.
what I missed besides just connecting with you and listening to MSL Lead, which is a great resource?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go on to medicalaffairs.org. That's the MAPS website. You can join there. If you're already a member, you can even identify a chapter. There are several chapters across the country. I'm leading one down in South Central, and each of the chapters are really focused at building that local network. But it's a great opportunity to meet people locally, not only to quote network, but really learn about what other companies are doing. And so you can do that through that website. And like I said, we're having our first in-person meeting April 10th here in Houston. And so you can even register for that on the medicalaffairs.org website.
I want to say something with this. I like the idea of being able to the networking components. Also thinking about, one of the questions, Mary, I know you get as a recruiter, and I have people reach out to me online all the time. It's like, how how do I get into a leadership role? And so part of that is ensuring confidence in whoever it is that you're engaging, whether it's your direct manager, whether it's with your own organization, or even if you're interviewing with another place as well too. And one of the things that you can do to close that gap is come to things like this and learn from others and get ideas. And then all of a sudden, again, Mary, I had to break it to you. All the ideas that I have, they're not all on my own. I can promise you that. It's really, it's more about how do I.
Some of them are mine.
We might need to cut that. Anyway, so what I would say, but Mary, you just go on thinking that'd be great. No, absolutely, okay. You do have good ideas. But it's how do we?
That sounded patronizing.
How do you combine A and Z, right, and come up with a new idea, or how do you take those types of things? It's a great way to show your adaptability, show your thought process, and how to make things even better as well too. So, I mean, I think that there's so many different benefits that could come from getting to know others in your region, understanding what's important to others. There's power in numbers, just like we talked about earlier, right? So why don't we apply the same principles within our network to help advance things, right? We have to take the lead on this. If it's I'm going to compare it to being a pharmacist years ago, back when PAs, there's nothing to do with, I love PAs to be clear, but there was this whole conversation of there's not enough providers out there. Who is going to have prescribing authority? And the pharmacists did not, there's so many different organizations, they did not come together as one and leverage. I mean, there's 4 years of pharmacology. Does it not make sense for us to be prescribers as well too, to help support? Again, like I said, and the PA group did a really great job of coming together, and they were able to advance that initiative. There's only a few pockets that have pharmacists that have prescriptive authority. We missed the boat on that, right? So how do we start thinking about these things together as groups to advance things where medical affairs wants to be, versus just being labeled as field medical information or whatever that is, like we've always been. We have to think this way, and we have to come together and have a solidified voice to be able to move things along. So that's my pitch for you, Denise. I think that there are those in your area. So it's Arkansas, Texas. Is that just those two states, or are there others as well?
No, the Gulf Coast. So I'm trying to remember the list. Louisiana. I know Tennessee is included. So yeah.
I love it. Well, if you're listening out there and you're a member of these, or number one, first check out the MAPS website. And then one of the action steps that I heard from earlier is you get in what you put into things as well too. And part of the key is to be able to pull some of these things through requires really kind of these beyond just one time a year. It really is, how do we come together to learn from one another? Again, very similar to what we're doing here on MSL Lead, is trying to share those experiences to help close some of that gap to advance. So I'm excited, Denise. I can't make this one in a week, but I would definitely love to make sure I prioritize the next conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be on LinkedIn spreading the information about upcoming meetings. We'll have 2 virtual per year and 2 in person. My co-lead is in Austin, next door neighbors with Mary. No.
Yes, we'll give her a shout out, Bridget Walker.
Yes,
Bridget Walker from Alucio.
An amazing person. Yes.
So we'll be doing that. I think one of the other advantages since COVID happened is remote work. So we don't only have MSLs out in the field working remotely. We have medical directors and other medical affairs professionals. So again, it's not limited to field medical. It's all medical affairs professionals. And I think that's a great opportunity.
It's another plug for, like, what do you want to do when you grow up, right? I mean, I know we had this itch of MSLs that, like, what's beyond just leading a team? What other opportunities are there? This is a great way to network, understand more, and in a less threatening way, I guess, if you will, if you don't feel comfortable at your own organization to ask those types of questions or those relationships. What a perfect place to kind of learn from from others' experiences to see if that's an area you want to pursue. So Denise,
Okay.
thanks for sharing that,
Thank
and
you.
reminding that as well too.
And if it's okay, I mean, I would love to encourage people to connect with Denise on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
And I think, with 1,400 people that went to MAPS, and we didn't all go to every session. So, I mean, sharing some of the hot tips that we all got from, talk to your neighbors who went to the conference, join your local chapter. In a year's time, we're going to all be in Denver, Colorado at the next meeting. I'm very excited about that because I think we're still going to be in snow season. And we don't see a whole lot of snow here, maybe once or twice a year if we're lucky. So that'll be pretty awesome. But yeah, I think it was so amazing. I'm going to have to make sure that we don't miss each other next time.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I guess, is there anything that you want to share, just sort of more generally, like based on your experience at the conference, maybe one takeaway of what's the future of medical affairs, field
Oh,
medical, or generally broadly?
yeah. I think Chad mentioned it at the beginning, and he didn't even go to the meeting, but medical affairs has to be the strategic partner. And we have to define our value or someone else will. So I think that's really the top of the list in regards to where we stand in our future. We've got to have a place at the table, and we are not the forgotten stepchildren anymore. We can be very instrumental in designing that strategy and assisting the organization moving forward.
Love it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I stole your line.
Why?
Chad
Love it?
likes to
You
say,
can
I
love it.
love it.
I mean, I do. I love a lot of things, but I love learning. That's one of the things. You can never stop learning on this. Denise,
Absolutely.
it was great for you to be able to hop on, share a little bit of your experiences with MAPS, your journey there within your 20 years of experience, what you're doing now, where you're wanting to go, and how you're wanting to, in essence, serve those around you with the chapter support as well too. So I can't wait to. I'm going to follow you on LinkedIn as well too.
All
I
right.
can't wait to learn from you as well, and definitely would love to connect with you again soon. Maybe hear some ways maybe of how you've been able to pull things through, potentially even with, or take things to the next level at the local level as well too.
Absolutely.
So thanks
That's
for
a great
hopping
idea.
on. Thanks for
Thank
hopping
you for
on.
having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us again on our leadership journey here at MSL Lead Chronicles. Remember, leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders learn from leaders. With that, lead well, and we will see you next time.